Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree. It's time for some new videos. And I'm starting with my Mario retrospective. This is going to be a longer video than some of my other retrospectives because Mario is the biggest franchise in video game history. And I'm not just talking about the insanely successful Super Mario games, the astronomically successful Smash Brothers, the phenomenally successful Mario RPG games, including the Paper Marios and the Mario and Luigi's, the incredibly successful Donkey Kong vs. Mario March of the Minis, and the inexplicably but still successful Mario Sports, and the goddamn Mario Party games. Mario. Remember the chant in the commercial? Mario. Remember that commercial? We all do. Super Mario Bros. 3, 1990. I was here for it. You were here. Well, if you weren't here for it, I can't blame you. But, yeah, Mario's the fucking face of video games. They've repeatedly done studies where they found he's more recognizable than Mickey Mouse, which at this point, that's not saying much because who the fuck remembers Mickey Mouse? Yeah, I know. He's the mascot of Disney. Whatever. Just a little company in who the fuck cares. I'm not going to go into a whole history of Nintendo because Mario wasn't there for the entire history of Nintendo. And I'm not going to get into the entire history of Mario necessarily. I was born in 82. Mario came on the scene in 81. So I was a baby when he entered the lexicon. So he was there my entire life. And I'm willing to bet, if you're one of those people that watches this channel, he was there for the vast majority of your life too. So, where did Mario begin in my world? Actually, on the Atari 2600. Hey, I was young at the time. The NES was out at the time, but I was broke-ass poor. My mom was a waitress. My dad was a bagger at a small-town grocery store. We didn't have a lot of money. Not enough to buy a Nintendo. The only reason we had an Atari was because somebody gifted us a knockoff Coleco Gemini that could play Atari cartridges, and somebody else in my family gifted us a shoebox full of Atari cards. One of those Atari cartridges was a little-known game you may or may not have heard of, but it exists. It's called Donkey Kong. It's this dude in a red hat and blue overalls, and he's climbing ladders and dodging obstacles. That dude's name was Mario. Now, I didn't know who or what a Mario was at this point. I just knew Donkey Kong was a game that I could play at the arcade, because every arcade at the time had a Donkey Kong machine. Or I could play it at home on the Atari cartridge, and it was not one of my go-to games, because, not just because the Atari card is a lousy port. At that time, I thought, compared to, Pac-Man, or Space Invaders, or Missile Command, or Joust, or Q*bert, Donkey Kong was a lousy game, in comparison. Yeah, well, I would later learn the error of my ways, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's how these retrospectives work. I'm talking about the history of Mario through the lens of my interactions with him. So, my first coming to knowledge of the existence of a character by the name of Mario was New Year's Eve, 1988. No, 87. 1987, New Year's Eve. I'm at a friend's house, and I can tell you why I know it was 1988, or 87, because in 88, my baby sister was born in April, which would have been after this, and in Christmas 88, we got our own NES. So it was New Year's Eve, 1987. And we're at my mom's friend's house, who I happen to be friends with my mom's friends' kids, as are my sisters. And they have an NES because they own a video store in town, which is a story I'm going to have to tell one of these days because that's significant. It played a huge role in my development. But all you need to know for this story is I'm at my friend's house. We're playing Nintendo games. We're playing a little bit of Pac-Man because, hey, let's play Pac-Man. Okay, sure. That's boring. Let's try something else. All right, let's play some Joust. We played Joust for a few minutes. We play a little bit of Wrecking Crew. This is boring. Give me something new. Give me something else. And then I sit there and watch my friend play this game called The Legend of Zelda, and my mind is blown. Now, this is my first time ever seeing Nintendo graphics outside of commercials on TV, which are usually exaggerated with cartoon characters. So this is my first time getting an actual hands-on, eye-to-eye, face-to-face viewing of Nintendo 8-bit graphics. And I'll tell you what, compared to what I could play at home on my Atari, the NES was mind-fucking-blowing. It was like, oh my god, that looks so cartoony and almost real. Obviously, it didn't by today's standards, but you have to look at it from the perspective of a 7-year-old at the time? 5-year-old? I don't know how old I was in 87. I was born in 82, so I would have been 5. Maybe 6. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I think I would have been 5. I had just turned 5 in September. So anyways, I'm at my friend's house. And, yeah, because I think I'm in kindergarten at this time. That's how I met him. Anyways, not important. So, then he pops in this other game that I've never seen before. Super Mario Brothers. Now, he just got the NES last Christmas, the year before. So, yeah, they own a video store, so they've got a bunch of games because they're renting them out at the video store. But he has, mostly the popular stuff that is going to rent well. Not too much of the obscure stuff. So that's good for me and for him because I get to play his games. And we're taking turns playing this game called Super Mario Brothers. And I cannot get past the first Goomba. And I get frustrated, and I throw the controller on the floor, and I get scolded by the adults for throwing the controller because, oops, it's not my controller, you don't do that. You could throw an Atari against a wall, controller, console, whatever, and it's not going to dent. You throw an NES an inch from where it sits, and, well, you need a new NES now. Those things are so goddamn fragile. That whole Nintendo means quality and their consoles last forever bullshit does not apply to the NES. I'll tell you that right now. And if you don't remember the goddamn blinking lights, you're lucky. Anyways. But that was my first experience playing Super Mario Brothers. Now, they also had Super Mario Brothers 2, because like I said, this would have been 87. That game had just come out. It was 88. Because my sister had been born already, and we got our Nintendo in 89. I just remembered. That's right. Because I was 6. Because I was 6 going into kindergarten. It had to have been 88, because I would have been 6. Alright. Now that I straightened that out. Okay, it's not important. But I was we played a little bit of Super Mario Brothers, and he's like, nah, this one's better. And then we played a little bit of Super Mario Brothers 2. And I was instantly in love with that game. I was like, wow, looks like a real cartoon. It looked that good to my eyes at that time. So then I began the process of nightly begging my parents to get a Nintendo. Constantly. My sisters joined in because they wanted to play Mario as well. And Duck Hunt, because we got to play some Duck Hunt at that party too. So finally, I guess it would have been Christmas of 89. We got an NES. No. We had to have had I don't know. I'm getting confused. It doesn't matter. We got our NES. It came with Super Mario Brothers. I would regularly rent Super Mario Brothers 2. But then I started seeing commercials for Super Mario Brothers 3, the new game that was coming out. So it would have been 89 because that game came out in 90. That makes more sense. I think I'm getting confused on the timeline. But if I sat down with a pen and paper, I could probably sort it out. But that's not... I don't got time for that. Y'all ain't got the patience for that. But I remember seeing the commercials for Super Mario Brothers 3. I remember starting to watch the cartoon, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. You know, I got some of the Super Mario Brothers figurine thingies from McDonald's when Mario 3 came out. And then I got to go see the video game. I got to play the video game, I should say, when it came out. And I got to go see the movie in 1993. I didn't have a Super Nintendo yet in 93. We'll come back to that in a second. But we had very few NES games during the span of its life because we were poor. We could rent games from time to time, very rare because they were more expensive than movies, from the video stores. And occasionally we would get one as a Christmas present or maybe a birthday present, you know, or we would get a used one from a yard sale from time to time. But for the most part, we didn't have a whole lot of video games growing up. So at this point, I figured out that Mario was in Donkey Kong, and so I started playing Donkey Kong on the NES. And I had Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 2, Super Mario Brothers 3, and the original Mario Brothers, as it was called on the cartridge, which is the original Mario Brothers. The arcade game. And a friend let me play his Game Boy, and he had Super Mario Land, which was fun. 93, I got to experience Super Mario World for the first time at a friend's house. He had a Super Nintendo. He had Super Mario World and Super Mario All-Stars. I loved Super Mario World, but I really wanted to get Super Mario All-Stars. But here's the first monkey wrench. Long story short, my sister found the Christmas list, found out that a Super Nintendo was on layaway at Kmart. My mom was going to pick it up in time for Christmas to put it under the tree. She found out that we found out, took it back, got her money back, and bought us totally different gifts instead. So I did not get a Super Nintendo in 1993 like we were supposed to. What I did get in September on my birthday, my 12th birthday, in 1994, was a Sega Genesis. And I swept Nintendo. I dropped him like a bad habit and ghosted him like an ex-girlfriend. I was like, sorry, dude. I'm in love with Sonic now. Go away. I was playing Mortal Kombat. I was playing X-Men, Power Rangers, Turrican, Streets of Rage. Like, good sci-fi, fantasy, action, adventure games. There were so many action games on the Genesis. There were a few on the Super Nintendo, but I was quickly finding out that if you liked action games like I did, the Genesis was where it was at. Nintendo was those weird games coming out of Japan that people call RPGs that I had little interest in outside of Zelda, and those weird mascot platformers that Sega had a few, don't get me wrong, but that was not their bread and butter. Their bread and butter, yeah, Sonic, sure, but Streets of Rage, Vector Man, Afterburner, Space Harrier, you know, Shinobi, action-focused games. Even Sonic is more action than platformer compared to Mario. Not entirely, but... And then you get a lot of run and guns. You know, you got like the, you know, Contra and Gunstar Heroes and Rocket Knight Adventures and stuff like that. And a lot of shoot-em-ups. More shoot-em-ups on the Genesis than the Super Nintendo and TurboGrafx 16 combined. Go run the numbers. Combine those two libraries, double it. That's how many shooters are on the Genesis. So don't tell me the TurboGrafx 16 was the best console for shooters. It wasn't. Neither was the Super Nintendo. It was the Genesis. It had 54 shooters. The Super Nintendo had like 27, and the TurboGrafx had 22, not counting the CD add-on for the TurboGrafx. If you're going to add that, you got to add the, like, 12 on the Genesis Sega CD as well. And a couple, 2 or 3 on the 32X. So, fuck you if you're like, the TurboGrafx 16 is the best console for shooters. No, it fucking ain't. It's the Sega Genesis. God damn it, you idiots. Now, I don't mean you people watching this. I mean you people out there. Pat Contry, who is telling everybody to buy a TurboGrafx 16. Fuck you, Pat Contry, and his cult of idiots. Anyways, no disrespect if you happen to like his videos, I guess. I used to at one point in time. Then I found out he was a douchebag, but that's not important. It's not that important. But it's important to the story. So, at this point, I'm knee-deep in Sega. Fuck Nintendo. I'm like, not interested. Saturn's coming out. I'm looking forward to it. PlayStation is coming out. I don't know what the fuck that is, or what the fuck is a Sony. All of our TVs say RCA on them, so I don't know who Sony is at this point. They don't mean shit to me. And I'm not interested in Mario, or Donkey Kong, or Kirby anymore. I'm just like, nah, no thanks. I played Super Mario World at a friend's house a couple of times. It was fun. I got to play some Super Mario All-Stars. I moved on. But then I started reading in the magazines. I started seeing glimpses of the future. Yeah, the Saturn was already out in Japan and it was coming to America. Same with the PlayStation. But Nintendo was showing pictures of Super Mario 64 and screenshots of, at the time, Ultra 64. Well, Project Reality, and then Ultra 64, and then Nintendo 64. But that. There you go. Your history lesson. But that's not important. And I was like, whoa. That looks pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. That looks pretty cool. So now I'm sitting here perplexed. Do I keep sinking money into the Genesis? Do I upgrade it with a Sega CD or a 32X? Because I'm at job age now. I'm 13 at this point. And yes, I have a job. I have 2 jobs at this point because you can work at those ages in the U.S. depending on what state you're in. I was in a red state, so there you go. Anyways, I'm starting to save up my money, but I'm like, do I want to save it up for a Nomad so I can take my Genesis games on the go? Do I want to save it up for 32X so I can play a slightly better version of Mortal Kombat? Or Mortal Kombat 2 specifically? Or do I want to save up for a next-gen console? So I'm like, okay, well, if I save up for a next-gen console, which one do I get? I'm eyeballing the 3DO, but that's hella expensive. My friend had a Jaguar, and I'm not going to lie, I bullied him for getting a Jaguar because, dude, you got a Jaguar. You obviously make bad choices in life. I can't be your friend anymore. We can talk at lunch. Keep your distance outside of school. Yeah, I was a jerk, but he bought a fucking Jaguar. What was I supposed to expect? I was 12. Anyways. Alright. I could save up for a Saturn, which I thought was going to be able to play Genesis games because they were showing the spec sheet on the Saturn in the magazines, and I'm a nerd, and I'm crunching the numbers, and I'm like, hey, that's got a Motorola 68,000 CPU running at X megahertz. The Genesis has a Motorola 68,000 CPU running at X megahertz. I'm starting to think maybe the Saturn has a cartridge slot. You could plug a Genesis cartridge into it. They confirmed this was not the case in the magazines, although they said it should theoretically be possible. It wasn't, but that's not important. So I'm like, looking at the Saturn, but I'm looking at the games in the magazine that they're previewing. Panzer Dragoon. Dragons? I mean, maybe. Space Harrier? Again? Are you kidding me? You've already released it on the Master System. You've got it on the Genesis. Now it's on the Sega CD and the 32X, and you're wanting me to buy another system to play this fucking game again? Sega, come on. Get with the program. Show me something else. They didn't. They didn't have anything else. They had Virtua Fighter. They didn't have anything else to show. I'm looking at PlayStation, and again, I'm looking at the screenshots, I'm reading the articles, and I'm reading them with, like, disinterest, because I'm like, it's Sony. At this point, I don't even know who Sony is. I've never heard of Sony. You're saying, you never had a Walkman? No, I had a portable cassette player by Panasonic that could play cassette tapes. Sony was not the only company that made cassette players. The Walkman was not the only cassette player ever made. God damn, people. No, I never had a Walkman. I had a Panasonic tape player that was the same thing as a Walkman made by a different company. So I didn't know what a Sony was. Like I said, all of our TVs said RCA. All of our stereos said JVC. All of our video game consoles either said Sega, Atari, or Nintendo. Sony wasn't any of those companies. So I was like, I don't know. I keep reading in the magazines that 3DO is struggling. But I want to get a next-gen console. So, September 1996, I've saved up my money. I put not PlayStation, Nintendo 64 on layaway. And I get to go into the store and play the demo of Super Mario 64, and I'm blown away. Oh my god, this is mind-blowing. I cannot believe they can do this with a video game. Long story short, I ended up returning the N64 for a reason that's non-related to anything, but I've already told this story in other videos. Go watch them. And this is where things start to get weird. I end up getting a Super Nintendo in 1996. I'm a little behind the times anyways. I got my Genesis in 94, my NES in, I guess, 88? 88 or 89, somewhere in that ballpark. It would have probably been 89, I think. I'll have to ask my mom. She would know for sure. But anyways. So this is par for the course. And yeah, I get a bunch of Super Nintendo games. Legend of Zelda, Super Metroid, SimCity. And then I also pick up Super Mario World. Love it. Blown away. Still fun. And then I get Super Mario All-Stars. And then I get Super Mario RPG. Brand new game just came out. And I've read about RPGs in the magazines, but I didn't know what they were because I didn't own any at this point. This was my first time playing a role-playing game. A video game. Now, I've played Legend of Eye of the Beholder 2, The Legend of Dark Moon, previously at a friend's house on a computer a couple of times. I went through the create a character, create a party process, and then played like got to the dungeon, died, and then that was it. So does that count? I don't know. And I played a lot of Zelda, but again, that's not really an RPG. I rented Phantasy Star 4 once, but the battery on the rental copy was burned out. The game couldn't save, so I could only play it for like an hour at a time, and then I couldn't save, so I took it back. This was the only time I ever took a rental back and asked for my money back, and when I explained to them that the cartridge was broken and I made them hook the system up and showed them that it was defective, they gave me my money back on my rental. In the form of a free rental coupon. Which I just promptly turned around and rented another game, and I don't remember what game it was at this point, but I do remember distinctly doing that. And then I rented Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo, played it for a couple of days, took it back, and was like, well, that's a thing. Wasn't that impressed. But I finally got a Super Nintendo in 96, and I was able to play Mario. And then there were other Mario games popping up on this thing. Mario Kart, that was fun. Mario RPG, I already talked about. And then all of a sudden, Mario's everywhere. Mario Tennis, Mario Golf, Mario Party. Yeah, I don't have a Nintendo 64, but my friends do. So I get to play Mario Party at their house. And also Mario Kart 64. And yeah, Diddy Kong Racing, but whatever. And in 1998, inexplicably, even though I've had a Super Nintendo for 2 years at this point, my dad buys me a Super Nintendo for Christmas. Yeah, that was a disappointment. I'm like, dude, I've already got one. It's literally sitting here on the floor in the living. You were just playing Tetris on it yesterday. How do you not know that I have? Whatever. I don't know how it happened. He bought me a Super Nintendo. I already fucking had one. It doesn't make sense. But now I have two. So I gave the old one to my sister because this was the new one. The scaled down smaller version. Not as good as the original. But good enough for me because my TV's got the RCA plugs in the back. My sister's TV doesn't. So it works for me because I get the better picture quality. The 90s were a weird time, people. But anyways. I start reading articles in the magazines You know, the N64 is doing pretty good, but not as good as previous Nintendo consoles, and they are talking about Nintendo struggling financially in the magazines. I remember that because I was like, whoa, Nintendo is struggling? That seems weird to me. I didn't understand the video game industry at the time. I just thought Nintendo was like the one name that was untouchable. But there were articles at the time in various video game magazines talking about, is Nintendo struggling? And then they were giving sales numbers and, you know, financial reports, which I would usually skim over. But, you know, I've still seen the headlines anyways. Not reading the articles, but seeing the headlines. And then on my 18th birthday in the year 2000, I have a real job now, you know, a go-to-work paycheck job, not throwing newspapers at people's porches or plucking tassels off of corn in a cornfield in the summertime. No, a real job. And so I saved up, and with the money that my parents gave me for my birthday, because my parents were working much better jobs now. We worked at the casino now, and so everybody was making good money. I was making good money. I was making more money at 18 years old bussing tables in the casino buffet than at any other point I've ever worked in my life. Go figure. Hey, it's backbreaking work, though. When I say bussing tables, I'm talking about at a buffet in a casino. It's not just an endless barrage of plates. It's trays, like full shopping, like 2 shopping cart sizes. It's a cart that's the size of 2 shopping carts full of plates that you're pushing around to the kitchen. Yeah, I'll do a whole video on it one of these days. I was making good money, but it was killing me, and I was only 18. But that's not important. What is important is I got a Nintendo 64 and a Sony PlayStation on the same day. Played a lot out of the PlayStation, liked it, didn't love it at the time. I was struggling to find games back then that I liked on PlayStation. I didn't look hard enough because I was too honed in on Super Mario 64, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Mario Party, which I loved the fuck out of that first Mario Party, Mario Kart 64, and a handful of games. Rogue Squadron, Shadows of the Empire, and a few others that were Nintendo 64 exclusives for the most part. Mortal Kombat 4 and Trilogy were both on PlayStation, but I played them both. The PlayStation version of Trilogy is better than the N64 version, but the N64 version of Mortal Kombat 4 is better than the PlayStation version of Mortal Kombat 4, but I digress. None of them are as good as Gold on the shitty-ass Dreamcast, but that's another video for another day. Fuck the Dreamcast. Anyways, it's the controller. That controller sucks. That's it. If the controller sucks, your shitty-ass console sucks. End of story. That's why the Dreamcast failed. Nobody wanted to torture themselves playing that piece of shit. Anyways, moving on. I'm being facetious a little bit, so don't come at me in the comments. Please, thank you. But I loved my Nintendo 64. But I was having a hard time finding games for it because there weren't any. Or I should say, very many. Where were the action games? Huh! Not on 64. Where were the fighting games? Not on 64. Where were the shoot-em-ups? Also, not on the Nintendo 64. The beat-em-ups? Guess again. What were there? Well, there were Super Mario 64 and about 10 Mario 64 clones, maybe 15. There was The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and a really shitty Majora's Mask, and a couple of almost RPGs that weren't really RPGs, that are more like Zelda than not, and Paper Mario, which is fine, and a shit ton of racing games, and a shit ton of wrestling games, and a shit ton of sports games, and fuck all else. Yeah, some first-person shooters, but I didn't like first-person shooters on the N64. They sucked. Again, it goes back to the controller. If I was gonna play a first-person shooter, it was gonna be the infinitely superior PC version of Quake, fuck the N64, or the still superior, even though not as good graphically, Doom on the PC, fuck the N64. Yeah, and fuck 007 GoldenEye. Fuck it in the ass. With a yardstick. Till it gets splinters. No, there were a lot of shit games on the N64, and there were a handful of about 24 quality games on the N64. One of them, Super Mario 64, probably the best game on the console. I've never finished Ocarina of Time, so that could be a contender, but I think Mario's going to win. Now, this is where things are going to get a little... I'm going to move a little bit faster, but they're going to get a little bit more complicated, because now I have a Game Boy Advance, and I got a GameCube. This is 2003. I got Super Mario Sunshine. It's okay. It's no Mario 64, but it'll do. I've got Wario World, which is weird. I've got a GBA with a bunch of Game Boy games because they work on the GBA, and I have a Game Boy player on my GameCube. So now I've got Classic NES, NES Edition Mario, Super Mario Brothers. I've got all 4 of the Super Mario Advance games, plus the e-reader and all of the Mario 3 e-reader cards. Yes, every one of them. I bought every pack. And then I've got Donkey Kong, and also Donkey Kong. I finally got Donkey Kong Country on the SNES. I tried Donkey Kong 64 on the N64. That game's rubbish. Please don't come at me in the comics. That game fucking sucks. If you like it, good for you. I hate it. It sucks. Now, moving on. But Mario was weird at this point because they weren't really making new mainline Mario games anymore. None of them. 0 new mainline Mario games on the Game Boy Advance. Not a single one. The GameCube got Super Mario Sunshine, and that's it as far as main Mario games go. And it got a shit ton of spin-offs. Mario Kart Double Dash, Too Many Mario Parties to Count, Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, a bunch of Mario Sports rubbish, Mario popping up in random fucking EA games inexplicably for some godforsaken reason, and a couple of Konami games here and there. And that's it. Nothing really worthwhile. I love the GameCube, but not because of Mario. Oh, and you know how I skipped over that movie that came out in 1993? Yeah, I saw that in theaters, and I regretted it. I regretted it. Not a great movie. Not a great experience. Then the Wii happened. I'm just going to say I hated the Wii. I didn't play any of the Mario games on the Wii because I hated the Wii. I had it. I loved it at first. Don't get me wrong. I loved it at first. I stood in line in the winter in front of a Kmart opening day, launch day, to get one brand new in the box. Played it for a couple of months and then lost interest. I hated Mario Galaxy. New Super Mario Brothers on the DS was fun, but I wasn't going to play it with a waggle wand. Super Mario 64 DS was not fun, but I had it because I needed something to play on my Nintendo DS. And I was starting to find out that I wasn't a fan of handhelds, and Nintendo's games weren't really doing it for me. You know, I was thirsting for something different. So this is when I left Nintendo behind entirely. Sold my DS, sold my GBA, sold my GameCube, sold the Wii, invested heavily in my PC. Built from scratch myself a gaming PC with a mid-tier graphics card. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass and say it was state-of-the-art. It was a mid-tier CPU, but it got the job done. It couldn't play Crysis, but it could play Gun. It could play, Black. It could play 13. It could play Doom 3 and the latest Quake and, other games that were actually cool and fun and exciting and fun to play. And Halo, it could play Halo. I said Black. I don't think it could play Black. I think I said, well, whatever. It could play the games like that. That tier of game. Basically, in between PS2 and Xbox, or PS3, Xbox 360 tier of games. Better than a PS2 or an original Xbox, not as good as a PS3 or a 360. It was in that range. But it was good enough for me. So I got into PC gaming for a little while, and then I felt the burn, because I really wanted to play Super Mario 3D World, when I saw the videos for it on YouTube, because now we had migrated to YouTube. We weren't reading magazines anymore. And so I bought one. I bought a Wii U. And I loved it. Loved everything about it, except for the fact that it had no games. Again, it's like, oh, it's the N64 all over again. But I didn't care, because just like the N64, the Mario game was well damn worth it. I did go back and try Mario Galaxy, because it was available on the Wii U as a download. Still didn't like it. And then I tried some Zelda games. And I got Hyrule Warriors and Splatoon and NES Remix, which had Mario in it. Both of them, I got both of them. And then I ended up getting Mario Maker, which was pretty fucking cool. And then I got a Switch, and I got to play Super Mario Odyssey. Now, that is my linear progression with Mario. After the fact, after I sold my Switch and all my game consoles and everything else, I went back and tried some of those Mario games that I missed out on via emulation. Hotel Mario for the CDI, the Mario Land games on the Game Boy, and a couple of the 3DS games. I don't remember what they were called. And I came to a realization that I love Mario as a character, and he's got some good games. 3 solid titles on the NES, all in the Super Mario franchise. Super Mario World is a solid AAA title. Mario RPG, solid title. Super Mario 64. But then it's questionable from there on. Odyssey's pretty solid. New Super Mario Brothers on the DS is pretty solid. Super Mario 3D World is pretty solid, but that's it. Like, from Sunshine until Odyssey, not a lot of great Mario games, to be honest with you. Except for, like, Smash Brothers is technically a Mario game. It's pretty good. Every one of them is pretty good, I'll give you that. And Mario Party, they're hit or miss, but they're fun for a couple of hours. Yeah, it's a good time with your friends. Nah, I lost interest in Mario because I lost interest in Nintendo. Because I finally got back into PlayStation in 2014. I got a PS4 and a PS3 within a month of each other, or a couple of months with each other. I got the PS3 in September, and I got the PS4 on Black Friday. So yeah, it would have been within a month of each other. I went all in on PlayStation, and I've dedicated a shit ton of time. I got a semi-decent gaming laptop. I got a Steam and a GOG account. I've been playing Planet Crafter, Minecraft, Diablo 3, Mortal Kombat X, which is legitimately good, and I don't even know if it's on the Switch, and I don't give a fuck if it is, because I've lost interest in Mario, I've lost interest in Nintendo. Yeah, I'll go back and replay Super Metroid or Metroid Prime, or go back and replay A Link to the Past or Super Mario World, but that's as much interest as I have in Nintendo or Mario at this point. Yeah, I watched the cartoon that came out a year ago, last year in the theaters, the movie, with Mario and Luigi and everybody. Yeah, it was fun, I guess. I don't like cartoons. My girlfriend loved it, so I'm happy for her. I didn't hate it. That's the best I can say. Stay cool.